Welcome to She Sells Radio. If you live anywhere in North America, it is extremely likely that you have heard of the brand Fresh Coat Painters. And today I am so excited to bring you Tara Riley, who's been president of Fresh Coat since 2014. And she and I were just starting to talk about background and experience. And I said, oh my gosh, hold on, we got to hit record because you are going to be so blown away as you listen to her background and what got her to where she is. She has over 30 years of executive management and operations experience. And what I'm really excited to dig into today is how to create profitable growth and scaling at every stage of your business. And so without further ado, Tara, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here today. And I know this is going to be an amazing conversation. I know I'm going to get to learn a lot. Our audience is going to get to learn a lot. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Like as I mentioned, I really enjoy your podcast, and you have just had an amazing group of women on your show in the past. I hope I can just add just another little smidge to join with that amazing group. So
yeah, no, I know you will. And this is fun too, because it's not every day you get to speak to the president of a company as large as Fresh Coat. And when we were talking in the chat ahead of time, you started to say something and I was like, wait, stop, we've got to hit record because this is probably something that someone would not expect to know about you. So I think you called yourself an accidental tourist of your career. I want to hear a little bit more about your background. What got you here? Sounds like this maybe wasn't always the plan your whole life. So
Right.
Give us the backstory.
Yeah. I think I mentioned if you had asked me when I was in high school, like most people do, Tara, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would often answer the question, I don't know anything but business. Now, I clearly didn't understand what business was. I really thought at that time, now I truly did think I wanted to be an engineer or a veterinarian. Wasn't quite sure. Went to school, by the way, with, now I chose a school that had strength in both engineering and veterinary. Thank God they also had a really good business college too. So because that's what I ended up graduating in a few years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why I always said, I didn't really have a strong plan when I was a young person. I always admire people and I had friends who just knew what they wanted to do. They were very driven towards that and seemed to accomplish a lot of things. In fact, it always made me feel a little inadequate at the time. Like, I wouldn't give myself the grace of saying, sometimes you just don't know what you want to do right away. But I did know
so much pressure.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure. So I get it. I was like you, I didn't know. So I'm totally getting what you're saying right now.
Yeah, it was, the pressure, I remember looking back and I remember we had to do this career day. And to me, it was like, I had to make this huge decision in my life and I had to decide what I wanted to be. And I'm thinking, I love, if you can actually, if you look at my hobby list, I'll tell you I don't necessarily have a single hobby. My hobby is activity. It's like
like physical activity.
Just constantly doing different experiences. It's doing things. I've certainly over the years have had some really, hobbies I focused on, but to me, it's about being able to experience lots of different things. And so, yeah, the idea of locking yourself into a career in college and things when you're 16 or 17 years old just is not feasible. I don't think, but it wasn't for me for sure.
You were thinking, okay, as long as it's funny too, you said veterinarian. I was literally talking to my husband this morning that I wanted to be a vet for so long. And then I saw what you had to do as a veterinarian in terms of the medical care. And that for me was, okay, I'm ruling that one out. Not a blood and guts type of person, but still didn't know for a long time. So for you though, it was just anything but business. Right.
At that moment. Yeah. I thought, yeah. Huh. And the funny thing is at that time, when I was in high school, I started working when I was young. My friends, but mostly my friends were working at McDonald's. So I went to work at McDonald's in high school. And then when I went off to college, I needed a good part-time job that could, get me some spending money and help out. And I already knew the McDonald's world. So I just went down to the closest store and said, hey, I've got experience, and kept working for McDonald's. And certainly at that moment in time, the idea of making that a almost 20-year career was not on my mind. And I wasn't
Wow.
even in school for business at the time. So, but I think one value that my parents gave me was to always do your best. Whatever
Mm,
you do, if you're going to do something, just do your best.
mhm.
That was something my parents always asked of me and say, if you're going to do something, just be willing to give it your best. And so I just took that into whatever I did, and it didn't matter if I was working the night shift at McDonald's, I was going to do my best at it.
Mm.
Um, and it was, it was funny. I remember they kept promoting me, and I wasn't asking for promotions. I'd be like, I remember one time I got a paycheck. Now, this was a valued lesson in leadership and communication. I
Sure.
got a paycheck one time with a raise on it, and I'm like, what's this raise? I call up the store manager and I'm like, Kathy, I got a raise. Oh yeah, didn't we tell you we promoted you? And I'm
Oh
like,
gosh.
okay, like, thank you.
I mean, I guess it's nice to find out on the paycheck, but probably would have been good for you to know a little bit ahead of time. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, but
Wow.
why I got, and what are you expecting of me now that you got me
Right.
this nice promotion? Thank you.
That's
It's
so
like,
funny.
yeah.
So in my research, you were doing at some point you were on the corporate side with McDonald's,
Mhm.
is that right? So
Yep.
yeah, tell us a little bit about that and then how that transitioned into to what you're doing with Fresh Coat now.
Sure. So yeah, so I spent the first 10 years or so working for McDonald's owner operators,
Mhm.
franchisees. So I can actually say now I've been in franchising my entire career, from
True.
15
Yeah.
years old and on. But when I finished up school, the operator I was working for was selling the business. He was retiring, and I had some connections, and people were saying, "Hey, you should talk to one of the regions and look at moving over to the corporate side."
Mm.
So I had a really good mentor at that time, and he had a lot of connections. And so he got me connected to, and I literally diverse interviews. I did an interview up in Portland. I did an interview in the Atlanta region. I was living in Texas at the time.
Hmm.
And so ended up was offered a really nice position in Atlanta, and moved to Atlanta, worked in the Atlanta region. What and when I went into that, it was what they call an area of McDonald's calls field support, which is working with McDonald's owner operators to help them with their business. And
Mm.
I was really blessed because right at that moment, McDonald's had really shifted from that role being a kind of what we would call an operations police, just out
Mhm.
there making sure all the standards, to a true business coaching role. And they were
Mm.
investing a lot of time and money into the idea of the coaches being really working with the operators on getting out of their business what they wanted to, not just are they following the standards and are lighting the arches every day, right?
Right,
And
right.
so that was part of the reason they were glad to hire somebody maybe from outside of you know I wasn't outside of McDonald's, but as weird as it sounds, most folks at corporate had grown up through the company stores. So they
Mhm.
would, come into what was known as the corporate stores and work their way up the ladder and into franchise support. What was appealing to me was I had worked on the franchise side and had a
Wow.
business degree, and had earned that at that point. So I had multi-unit experience by that time. And that was something that I just brought to the table, but I fell in love with it. And that's
I
how
want
I,
to pause if I can just I want to pause you and ask you because I think this is really interesting. So McDonald's is known for operational excellence, efficiency, all of that. What are like one or two of the top lessons you took from your time involved with that organization?
well, I mean, certainly capacities,
Mm.
really understanding how, and a couple things. One was just knowing like, okay, if you add another body to a lunch hour, you'll get more sales, because if you can move cars through the drive-through faster, or you can, it was really understanding those efficiencies of knowing that you have to there's only so much volume that that labor can produce, right? It's
Mm.
not infinite. Like, it's
Right.
not that I started to realize is you have the customers trying to come in the door. The faster you can serve them, the more volume you can do in an hour. That was one revelation. Probably the biggest
Mm.
thing looking back though, and probably the most important thing was having the opportunity to hire and develop and lead a lot of people. Um,
Mm.
I think that gets underestimated in the restaurant world, but It was really the fact that, by the time I was 20 years old, I had been hiring and developing people already in a management capacity. And so, if you ask me now, looking back, what were some of the greatest lessons I had, and realizing that is a gift, the gift of experience, and it was also realizing that, the opportunity to hire so many people young people, especially in their first job, you realize, it's very aspirational. Nobody comes to work trying to screw up, by the way.
That's a good
Very few,
point.
I have yet to met, I probably employed thousands of people, at different times. And, I can honestly tell you that although some people made mistakes and sometimes people would break rules and they would have to be let go. But the bottom line is, I don't think anybody ever got up in the morning going, I'm just going to screw up today.
A really important thing to remember, right? Whether someone's listening and they're a solopreneur, they're leading a bigger team, like it's so easy to create stories in your mind about somebody's intentions. And I think just locking into that one belief system of no one is intentionally trying to screw up. It doesn't mean there won't be mistakes.
Yeah.
They're all doing the best they can with what they have. I think that's really powerful.
I also think that you also can recognize that sometimes when you see the mistake made, you can start to see that maybe it was a mistake in communication, or understanding. I had a young manager at work for me, and a very sharp guy. And I mean, he went on to work in the medical field. I mean, he was a student at A&M. And I remember one day he was a shift manager, and he just was not, I'd come in and his shift would be a little wonky, as I'd say, the drive-through would be wrapped, and some, people would be out of position, maybe 2 or 3 people standing around at the counter, and yet the drive-through isn't, maybe one person over there. And finally I was like, and first I told him, I said, hey, move some of those people into drive-through, that was the first thing. And then after it happened a couple of times, I started thinking, he's either not getting it or he doesn't, maybe he has a paradigm problem. So I just asked him, I said, hey, let's think this through. What percentage of our sales comes through drive-through? Now, I will tell you that at that moment and during that hour of the day, it was 75%.
Okay.
Maybe closer to 80. And he looked at me and goes, I don't know, maybe 30%. And a light switch went off. And I went, okay, his decision making was based on that paradigm. And it was right.
Yeah.
If you thought that, then what he was doing with where he was positioning people totally made sense. And once he realized, I said, go look at the numbers and tell me what you see. And then his eyes got really big and he's like, oh, I didn't know,
Wow.
So when I say that, he wasn't trying to, he wasn't like just not caring even. He was making a decision based on flawed information.
Yes.
And, that was a big lesson. There's a lot of them. We could talk for hours about little lessons I picked up just from this era of my life.
For sure. And I want to, so we'll fast forward a bit into FreshCoat, because you've got so many good lessons about scaling and entrepreneurship. The one thing I want to just pull out that we didn't talk about from what you said before, and then we'll fast forward a little bit in your career, is the idea of creating the capacity for what you want to create, for the sales you want to create. And I think this has been a big lesson for me, and something that we work with the clients in our community on too, is looking at, okay, you've got this sales goal or you've got this revenue goal. Could you even take it on if you wanted to right now? Like, are you ready? And we talk about being a match for what you want from a mindset standpoint, from an energy, from a tactical standpoint. And I think that's something to always remember. And I love how you said it, like you have to have the right people in the right roles and the right capacity to be able to take on even more. So it's helpful to hear you say that, because that's something we teach in just like a slightly different way in the community. But I love what you said, because it's so true. It's so true. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, fast forwarding to our FreshCoat owners, we start with, what do you want to take home from the business? I mean, if you're a business owner and you're setting your goals, the first thing you need to, I always tell them, start with your personal goals. This is something I've noticed with small business owners, especially solopreneurs. It's very difficult to separate the two. It tends to be all, your life and your business and all of your finances just get so intermingled.
So true.
And I often will say, okay, step back for just a second, set the business aside. What do you and your family need? Or what do you want? What do you absolutely need, first of all? Because sometimes we get nutted up because we're scared. I can't even, maybe I'm not earning enough in my mind, so start with that. What's the minimum you need? And now forget that. What is it you really want? Because that's the most important thing.
Favorite question. Yeah.
Talk to, and what's aspirational? What, and look out 5 years, where do you want to be? And I remember, and then using, I'm a believer in visual affirmations. I had a franchise owner, and she and her husband wanted to be retired and living on a boat. Said, well, get a picture of the boat, put it in your office. And you know what? She hit that goal. It's like,
that's great.
That, those are the kinds of things. So then you have to say, okay, can I take it on? So what does your business look like? So if you want X amount of income, right? Then the business has to be able to do, the revenue to drive that. So let's work our way backwards. So start with, tell me, what is the income level you want? Let's talk about, using this business model. What are you going to need in sales to hit that? And then you can really, there's a math formula, working your way back, right? It's, if you're a salesperson and you want to hit a certain goal, I've got to make a certain number of calls. I'm going to have, first of all, I have to do a certain number of deals. Same thing in, painting, right? We're going to have to do a certain number of projects for the year at a certain, dollar amount in order to make the kind of money you want to make in this business, right? And now we know, all right, well, if we're going to do that many projects, we're going to have a certain number of painters. One painter can't just infinitely do $1 million in painting, right? It could, if it was a really good painter and, just did works of fine art and could sell them for $1 million, then we could probably one painter. But there's sort of a natural capacity for how much, high quality painters can do and achieve quality levels, right? So as we work our way back into that, the idea is now to say, okay, and then how many leads how many customers are you going to have to acquire? How many sales are you going to have to do? And there's a capacity there too, because you're out in homes, right? So you're going to be out there visiting with the customer, understanding what their project is, building trust there. That takes time, right? So it turns out that one person can't do all of that. I think probably, going back, I learned that I had 24-hour stores. You can't be there 24/7. You have to rely on other people. So it goes back to with Fresh Coat, it's really about, okay, now I need to hire and empower people to run certain, parts of the business. I need salespeople. I need, obviously we need high quality painters. And how do we help improve how do we improve that talent pool? Right. So there's all kinds of questions out there, but that's business, right? So you can't, the art of business is really putting together a machine that has all of these parts in it that, can basically say, hey, I can fulfill the need. And then it's a question of how much can you do in a period of time, and you need people.
Which is part of why, for somebody listening, if they're an entrepreneur, visionary, they have to, sooner than later, have someone on their team who can help with that structural element. It's so important. And we talk a lot on this show about the mindset piece and vision piece and expansive thinking. And it's like, yes. And you've got to have the structure and the support underneath that and the infrastructure to grow. So I want to have a deeper dive conversation, Tara, into scaling and what that looks like along the way and along different revenue marks. Before we go any further there, I want to just quickly ask about what it was like for you to become president of this company. And, we were talking before we hit record too about, I'm assuming male dominated in many ways. Now, you said a lot of your top, franchise owners and sales reps are women, which I love. But we have so many women listening who are, whether they're in sales or whether they're entrepreneurs, they're in male dominated industries. It's a big conversation, something they're looking for support around. How do I navigate this feeling kind of different from a lot of my colleagues? So what was that experience like for you, and how have you navigated that?
Certainly we're in the trades. I think most people would argue that the trades are
Yeah.
male dominated, like you said, but
Mhm.
you start looking at residential painting, I start thinking about who our customer is. And or home services, businesses of any kind, in general, the customers are women. Quite
Good
honestly.
point.
So, I think the mistake a lot of businesses make, whether, their trades, franchise business, whatever, is we get caught up in the operation of the business when you really need to be focused on your customer. And who's your customer? And can you think like your customer? I am our customer. I'm
Yeah.
probably the exact profile of our customer. I'm a busy professional. I like my stuff to be nice and maintained, and I'm not doing it myself. Now,
Yeah.
once upon when I was younger, I tried to do lots of things myself and realized a couple things. One was my time is valuable. Two, I'm not as good at it as professionals are. And I started to learn very quickly that I learned an appreciation for professional, how valuable a good professional is. And I will tell you that, but that's part of it, is thinking about who the customer is. And if the customer is female, or the primary customer is female, then that makes a big difference. Now, we're still in a male dominated trade now, especially on our business to business and the commercial side. There's working with big general contractors. It is, I think it's about, again, you're focused on solving the problem and providing service. I don't think that's gender specific. And I think I think another thing I was blessed in, I was a bit of a tomboy growing up, and I had a lot of, my neighborhood just seemed to had a lot of guys in it. And I don't know, it was always very easy for me to be fluid in that. So I've, I guess, and I was blessed, again, a blessing from McDonald's. McDonald's was very diverse, a lot of women executives. So I think I had the blessing of having some really good role models throughout that career. When I first went to Atlanta, our regional manager was a very powerful and successful woman. And, and so it was nice to have those role models. So I guess I just never felt like that. I guess, and people would talk about a glass ceiling at McDonald's, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I think sometimes we create our own mindsets around that. I think that's probably, we're probably worse about creating the mindset, and limiting ourselves. I mean, I think there are some real limitations out there that we have to understand and overcome. I think, in fact, one of your prior guests was talking about confidence in women. That, how even as inadvertently as children, we're told not to do certain things. We're bossy. If we try to direct people or lead, we're bossy. Whereas young boys my age, that's what you're supposed to do, right? I mean, it's all those little, maybe subtle social things that we all faced it. I mean, and there's yin and yang to everything, whether you're female or male. We all have our own baggage to carry, I think. And I always just wanted to focus on, what are the advantages of what I bring into the table. I remember one time we shifted teams, and this was obviously prior to this role, and it just randomly, I ended up being the only woman on the team. So I walked in, sat down, and said, well, I'm sorry, you guys are outnumbered. That was kind of my attitude towards it. They all cracked up. And my dad was a golfer. So one thing that was a blessing for me, my mom and dad both golfed, and I learned to golf. One of my earliest memories was about 3 years old, being on a golf cart with my parents. So I played golf, and, in the corporate world, that was a blessing. And you know what, the guys invited me to, as soon as they found out I played golf, they're like, oh, great, come on out. And yet then I'd have women telling me in the same office, like, well, there's a glass ceiling because the guys play golf. I'm like, okay.
It's all your perspective. Like, one of the biggest, and I agree with you. I'm always just so curious to hear different people's perspective on here, and because everyone has a different experience, right? But it is, I think, very much, what are you going to focus on? And then so two things I'm taking away from what you said. One, and this is for specifically our women in finance who listen, because we have a lot of women in finance and insurance who listen. What you said about, well, who's your customer? the buyer there is usually if it's a male female couple, it's usually the woman, right, is the one who's actually making the decision. So that was really big. And then two, like you just, from what I'm hearing, you didn't really see it as a thing. You were like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go in and I'm going to be successful no matter what.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that. So, okay. So let's speak to, you talk about how there's different bottlenecks at different levels of revenue growth. And it sounds like one of your genius areas is how to be profitable at every level, which again, we've got people all over the map who are listening. And so I think whether you're listening and you're a sales professional, you're still going to get something out of this in terms of mindset. So listen. Or if you're an aspiring entrepreneur or an early stage entrepreneur, I know we have women who listen who are in multi 7, 8 figures as well. I'd love if we could just speak to, I know we don't have a ton of time, so I want to think about the highlights here. Let's speak at a high level to what you say about, we talk about scaling capacity and bottlenecks and how they impact overall sales and just how we need to be thinking about it at different stages of growth. And maybe we break it into like hitting your first 7 figures, then multi 7, then 8. I'll let you take that where you want to, but
Well,
yeah.
and that's a good question. The business, every business model is a little different as to where where the inflection points are and how much can one person generate, right? And how much support do you need? I mean, even in pure sales, you've got to have a good operations team or, fulfillment team behind you at some point. I think it depends. But for me, it's starting with the understanding that is understanding what's important to you, time and money, right? So what's the balance of time and money that's important to you? It starts there because you have to, if you all, I guess the barriers I've seen, and I've mostly dealt with, emerging entrepreneurs, right? Because we
got a lot of those listening. Yeah.
And it's, I think the first thing is you get to a point and you feel like the only way you can do more volume or you can do more profit is to work harder. And if you're thinking that, you're likely at a capacity ceiling. And the bottom line
point. Okay.
Especially if you're pretty much a solo entrepreneur, you have not yet really started to hand off some of the management things. I think there's like 4, I like to look at 4 stages. One is, when you're an emerging solo entrepreneur, you're basically, I listed as WAO, you're working your ass off. It's like,
we can relate.
You're basically doing just about everything. You may have, like, in a case of a fresh coat owner, you've got some painters that you may not be doing the painting, but you're going out, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the sales calls, you're the production manager, you're the hiring and training manager, and you're the scheduler, right? And so you're out there, and there's only so much volume you can do before you're giving up something, because you still have to make sales calls. Somebody's got to answer the phone. I mean, so the next step is really that you have to, and you're working your butt off and you're managing people, you're managing some people. The next phase is you really have to start managing managers, right? So you have to start getting some people who are going to manage parts of your business for you. You back yourself out, from, I have a little business model drawn up, but it's, the end is the finance side and the head, the first end is the thinking side, right? You're planning and strategizing. Then you have business acquisition. You have business fulfillment, and then your financial and data acquisition kind of, sorry, that's way too much stuff to talk about here, but
no, all good. It's helpful to just have a high level.
Yeah. But as the owner of the business, you'll never give up the strategy and thinking part of the business. You should be farming off the other sections of the business. We highly recommend people, I have a finance degree, but when we owned restaurants, I hired bookkeepers and accountants, right? Our number 1 franchise owner, who is a female, she came from the account. She's a master accountant, right? But she still has other people do her accounting, because she said, Tara, I bought a painting company so I wouldn't have to do this. Now, is she very, right? Because you have to look also at what's the value of that particular role. as a business owner, you need to value your time, right? You've heard it, you need to value your time at $200, $300, $400, $500 an hour,
Mm.
whatever you want to achieve.
Mhm.
And you need to work at the highest value pieces.
Yeah.
So, getting customers, getting, work, acquiring high quality assets in your business, whether that be people or machinery, whatever you need. If I could hire like I said, when we owned the restaurants, I said, if I could hire a bookkeeper for a couple hours a day, $15 an hour and lunch, right?
Right.
So if I said, oh, well, no, I'm not going to hire that person, then I was paying myself that to do that role. That's what you have to think about.
Right. And do
When
you
you're,
believe, Tara, do you believe in hiring before you're ready? Like
yes.
okay, talk about that briefly, because I know there's different philosophies there.
Well, and so it's hard. This is the hardest thing and I think for entrepreneurs, and I've heard a business coach say, well, don't hire them until you can afford them. And I'm like, you can't do that because you'll never get there.
Mm-hmm.
What you have to realize is that this is where the risk comes in. And you've got to say, okay, I want to get to this level and I can't do it by myself. So I have to invest in that person and that capacity at the beginning. And I think where the mindset comes in, I think sometimes we see that, like, if I'm going to hire, somebody making whatever, number,
Sure.
that I feel like I'm writing a check for that amount. When you really have to break it down to, no, how much does that person have to incrementally add to the business weekly? Right.
Right.
So if I'm going to go out, okay, now I've been doing estimating and sales now I'm going to hire a salesperson to go out and do that. And I'm going to focus on lead gen or whatever,
Right.
and give myself a little more time in the business. Well, then, okay, whatever that person is going to earn is not one big lump sum. They're going to pay for themselves. And that's what you really have to look at is being able to understand, okay, what incremental revenue do I have to get just to break even on this person? Okay.
Great point.
And you find, and it's when we do the math with our owners, you're stunned. It really isn't as huge of an amount as you'd think. And if that person then creates the production that they should, now your business is making more money. Right? And they're making money. It's a win-win. That person now has a role, ideally, that they love. They're making hopefully more money than they were expecting to make. And now your business is making more money.
Yep.
And
switch in mindset. Yeah.
And that's, I think, what I've run into over the years coaching business owners is that it's hard. Now there's also a risk, because what if I hire the wrong person?
Sure.
And they don't succeed? That's probably the big unspoken fear, is like, so now am I confident in my hiring? And I think what I've seen, at least, especially, and like I said, I've worked in, with franchise owners a lot. That's where the big, I think, lack of confidence or lack of experience can come in. And I don't trust myself to be able to hire well. And so now it's really scary, because I'm now going to turn over one of the most, especially like if I'm going to hire a salesperson, I've been doing it. I've been controlling that. That's my income source. And the first time I hire and hand that off to somebody, what if I'm wrong? And it's like turning the spigot off in my business. I mean, and I can see, I get, but you're also at some point, if you don't hire that person, you have no quality of life.
Right. Exactly. Well, and I think that's helpful too, to say, what is this fear really about? Right. And go deep into it, not just, I feel some resistance around writing this paycheck every month, but what is the fear really about? And examining that. And then from there, you can say, okay, I need some tools and resources to know, how do I hire a great salesperson? And maybe I should expect that sales are going to go down for a little bit when I make that hire, which is what I generally tell people. You got to be prepared for them to go down before they go up. So
you've got to be prepared to take a little bit of a back step for a period of time. And I think, that's probably where the argument comes in. Are you ready? If you need every dollar you're taking in and you can't afford to backstep a dollar, then then you're not ready to hire somebody. That's for sure.
Great point. That's a great point.
And that goes back to really what I was talking about in the beginning. When you really sit down to set your goals, you need to look at, okay, what is it that I really need from the business? And now you're looking at a portfolio sometimes, because a family, maybe it's, in our case, it may be the wife may be running the business, a husband may be running the business, partners may be running the business, whatever. Is there, in every scenario is different. Is this the sole income for the family, or for you as an individual, or do you have other sources of income? So, I mean, there's so many dynamics there, but assuming it's your sole source of income, you got to focus, you got to turn around and say, where is it I really want to be? Right. I think it's important to remember your long-term goal, is just to say, because there's levels you're not going to get to without scaling there.
Right.
And that goes back to when you're, again, if you are giving every inch of time that you can give, and I'm going to tell you, most people get into business for themselves, not because they want to make a lot of money necessarily. I mean, everyone wants to make, we all want to make a lot of money,
Sure.
but it's really to control time.
Yes.
It's to have
Time
independence, freedom. And the problem is, if you don't create an organization that doesn't need you, you don't have freedom.
So true.
So, you have to, in order to really have freedom in business, you need to be able to walk away for 2 weeks and the business continues to operate and generate income. Then you have a business. Because if you can't do that, then you have a job.
Such a good point. It's such a good point. Every solopreneur is like, oh, I know. Then there's stages too, right? So there are stages that we go through, but I think with that in mind of what are you ultimately creating for yourself? And are you always having the mindset of not being needed and necessary in the business?
Yeah.
Or are you letting things be contingent on you? I know we've got just a couple minutes, and I know there's 2 more phases, I think, that you said, right, in the growth process. So can you touch on those briefly? And then I want you to share where everyone can connect with you.
I'm sorry, in the growth process,
so I think you said there were 4 different stages with like scaling and bottlenecks.
Right.
So
it's really just,
yeah.
So, you're an owner operator, you're basically working a job every day that happens to be you're self-employed.
Sure.
Then you start to manage managers.
Yeah.
And then you're leading managers, which is so you can see as the organization is growing. So now, when you're leading managers, you're really sort of the CEO of your own business. And now you've got, directors or VPs, whatever, that are running the different segments of your business. And then the enterprise level of a business is when you're leading leaders. So, so leading managers would be, I think if that's the simplest way I can put it. So, really, do you graduate yourself to the board of directors at some point? Do you hire a CEO of your business? And, I've helped people transition through that. I always say, Freshcoat started with owner operators and, the franchise. And I said, I'm a great example of the fact that now they're, retired. They're still owners, but they're not involved in the day-to-day because guess what? They hired a president, they hired a C-suite to take care of the business for you. And I think it's really hard a lot of times for solo, entrepreneurs in the beginning to think, well, I could never do that. Well, you might, if you grow a large enough business. You know what? There are people that can, out there that specialize in running it for you, and but it goes back to that first question. So I think hopefully I answered that question. That's just, those kind of 4, what we would call 4 stages. And for every business, whatever business model you're in, there's inflection points. You get to if you don't move over and change and the hardest thing is I'm changing my role. Even in the almost 9 years I've been here at Freshcoat, my role has changed. When I first got here, I had a team of 5 or 6 people. And now we have a team of 22 people. And, I've gone through some of those stages, even with Freshcoat. When I first got here, I had to do a lot more heavy, I had to take on certain roles, and because we just didn't have enough, we weren't at the volume, we didn't have the team yet. And every time as we were growing, we just kept investing in adding people. And what's nice is that as you get to those levels, those people get to specialize more. In the beginning, you need more generalists in your business. And that's another little mistake I see we all make, is that, we actually need to hire bigger when we're smaller.
Ah,
I
that
need,
makes sense.
your
Yeah.
first hire in a smaller business needs to be a more skilled person. When you're bigger, you can hire more entry level people because you have people who can specialize in one thing or another, but you need more generalists and skilled people in a smaller business. And that's a really hard thing for people to do because they generally come with a higher price tag.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Gosh, this is so good. I mean, so many little things that are paradigm shifts and perspective shifts. And I think one of the biggest things I'm taking away is always making a decision based on where you're going
Yeah.
and thinking about it that way and analyzing through that lens. So I think we're just going to have you back to dive into more of this because
This has been so much fun. I'll come back anytime.
I feel like there's so much more and we just kind of scratched the surface here. But this was amazing. Tara, can you please tell everyone if they want to connect with you or learn more about FreshCode and the opportunity, what the best way is to do that?
Sure. I mean, to connect with me, probably best way is to go through LinkedIn, Tara Riley. Just, plug in Tara Riley and FreshCoat, you'll find me. I'd love to connect with people. That's just a fun thing. If you're interested in the opportunity that FreshCoat provides, freshcoatfranchising.com is out there. And by all means, we're always open for business. I'm going to tell you, we have an amazing group of professionals out there, of business owners that come from all walks of life that are dedicated to providing professional painting services. And we're always open for business. So freshcoatpainters.com. If like you said earlier, if chances are somewhere in the country you're living near a fresh coat, and we're here to provide professional painting services both in the residential and the commercial spaces. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tara. This has been really, really enlightening. And like I said earlier, perspective shifting in terms of things we want to be thinking about and need to be thinking about as we grow and scale. And so thank you again for your time, for your expertise. It was so great to have you.
thank you. Like I said, I've enjoyed getting to know your work a lot better, and thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing for women and women entrepreneurs and sales folks out there, and the guys too. I'm sure we're all
Shout
getting
out to our
out
men. There's a lot of men who listen. We love you.
You need your that is, by the way, I will say, I was trying to tell somebody where I was going. I'm like, she sells, it's like, I was just on the beach. She sells,
yeah, right.
Oh gosh, I'm done.
I know. It's so funny. I did not think about that when I named the company. And then when I go on podcast interviews, I get a fair amount of that. So
awesome. Thank you.
But yeah, no, so good to have you. So thank you again. And to you, my listener, go connect with Tara on LinkedIn and let her know what you loved about this episode. I know there was so much wisdom, and I'm always a big fan of when I can accelerate the learning curve and not have to go through different experiences to learn what I need to learn in order to achieve my goals. Like, that is the beauty and the value of connecting with incredible leaders like Tara. So thank you as always for being a member of the She Sells community. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Remember to head over to elisearcher.com to check out more resources to help you accelerate your sales, your abundance, and your life. And I will see you on our next episode. Bye for now.